on this. Okay, I want to thank Craig for reminding me to record. We're already 5 minutes in. Let's see. At this point, I'm going to switch over to, let's see, come on. Hey, come on, guys. I need to find share. There we go. Start share. And we'll just share, yep, the desktop. So here we go with the desktop, and I'll have to move this over here. And my next, thank you, Mac. My next attempt in that direction was with Patton versus Rommel. This was around 86, I think. And I wanted to have something in which the characters could, or in which the players could get feedback, but that required knowing what the player was doing and thereby measuring their stuff, their behavior. And so with that, after some thought, I realized that there were metrics I could calculate that would measure player behavior. And so, for example, one of the simpler metrics was this one here. When your metric for a particular attribute passed a certain threshold, you'd get this little window popping up. And if you got worse and worse, you'd get an angrier and angrier pattern showing up. You know, move your goddamn armies. I want to see more maneuvering. So that was at least the idea. And actually, it did work fairly well. Players did report that they did seem to like it. So, but it was actually a fairly simple analysis. I think there were just 3 or 4 parameters that it was looking at. So I didn't, but I very much liked the idea of measuring player performance. That's really something that the games business, as far as I know, hasn't done a lot of. I would assume that in the last 20 years, they've come a long ways on this, and that they are now doing lots of measurement, not of testers, but actual players in their normal and behavior, and building up statistical characterizations. Does anybody know of any such efforts on any games? Apparently not. Okay, well,
I have a very easy example that I've seen in multiple platforming games, 2D platforming games, which are very, very easy to quantify in this way, which is the use of heat maps, like in what sort of spaces within the map players spend most time, and then visualizing them color-coded. This, of course, for storytelling might be quite useless in that direct way, but it might be something that might be adaptable depending on the questions one has, of course.
Very good, yes. Well, nowadays, with most games being played over the internet, and we have a wonderful opportunity to collect data on player behavior. And that I realized with Morte D'Arthur, it was going to be trivially simple to collect that data, analyze player behavior, and learn from it. That's how I got the feedback system. The feedback system was actually based on some similar things, although in programming terms, it was completely different code. Anyway, let me, what I did was I simply inserted a little code that recorded every player action, which is trivially simple. Basically, you just need three basic bits of data. 1, what turn it was. 2, what choice they made, and there are only 3 at most. 3, what time it was. And then I added a fourth. I thought it was important to be able to differentiate players, because if I, what if there were two players simultaneously and they were taking turns, boinkity, boinkity, boink, different turns or different actions, different places in the sequence. So I needed a way of identifying them. And I absolutely did not want to get into the dirty tricks where you know, delve into the you know, specifics of that user and figure out, you know, who they are, what their email address is, all these other things that are used to track people. So anyway, let's see, okay, there we go. Sorry. Anyway, so I came up with this code. I added some more. Let's see if I can bring this up. There you go. Can you see that now? Let's take the top line here. First, my way of identifying them, I used a cookie, but I did not want to, again, violate anybody's privacy. So when you first enter the game, launch the game, first it asks if you already have a cookie. If you do, then it uses whatever name has been assigned to you. If you don't, it picks a name at random and gives you that name. And then it thereafter, you are always known, in this case, as Corey, whoever that might be. Next comes date and time. And unfortunately, well, I could have modified it, but this is the way I got the data out of the JavaScript function. So that gives me the exact time. It turned out to be, a useful data. Oops, I'm sorry. It's only this that specifies the date. Next, as another way of differentiating users, I have screen size, horizontal and vertical. That was also useful in terms of telling me how many people are using desktop and how many people are using smartphones. Let's see if we can, here we go. Here's a smartphone user right here. You know, you can tell by the small screen. Unfortunately, some smartphones seem to have variable screen sizes. I saw some users who would have one set of screen sizes, and then a little later they'd have a different set. I never understood that. Then finally comes the actual data. Corey here at this time is playing turn 6 and chose option 1. And that's the actual data that I'm looking for. And then you could see he does turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, turn 10, and so forth. These values are some, I'll just say they are some metrics that I'm following. Okay, so this was the data, and I've been collecting it since, under this format since January 6th. And you can see I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of this data. Let me just check. And this one is 2 days old. Yeah. And it's 444 kilobytes of straight text data. Now, I actually used an earlier one for my big analysis, but let me see if I can't find, okay, here we go. Here is quickie analysis. Let me, come on thing. Here we go. Okay, so we've got in that case, we had 4890 lines of data, 98 different players. Now, the true number of players was probably a little smaller than that because it is conceivable that somebody could log on, get on, play for a while, get off, and then lose their cookies or purge their cookies. Moreover, there were lots of spiders coming through. The spiders were very easy to identify because they just sort of bounce around on turns 0, 1, and 2. I was able to write the code to ignore that. Let's see, but then we have analysis for individual players. So Corey did a total of 81 moves and got as far as turn 89. Neo, however, took 252 moves and got up to turn 345. That's the end. So Neo completed it. And you can see there were a goodly number of people who completed it. Oh, yeah, that's right. So anyway, you can see there were quite a few people who completed it. However, what is most useful is, or a particularly useful metric, is the number of turns that people took. Some people took, 2 moves, 3, 5, 1. Now, honor, 1 move is almost certainly a spider. This is some output coming from before I cleared out spiders. But some people took only 5 moves. This is a very common problem. A lot of people would just play a few moves. And here we go. Here is the total number. Each vertical bar represents 1 player. That looks wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's, no. Each vertical bar, I can't recall whether it's a player or a session, but I'm pretty sure it's the player. And what you can see, now I'm clearly confused because we're at 120. But basically, this shows you how many people got way out to the end of the story. And so you can see there's an awful lot of people who just played a few turns and then walked away. That dropped off. And then we got a pretty good group of people who continued all the way to the end. Some of these gaps I can explain. For example, this big gap here is the big battle that Arthur must fight, and that's a huge tree. And so it is very common for people to be here and make a choice that just jumps them over to there, and they skip over a lot of the tree. And the same thing here. Basically, wherever there's a gap like that, that's a tree, and almost all the trees are Merlin dialogue, or yes, Merlin dialogue. So you can see there are plenty of those. Another interesting measure, here we go. This is the average number of seconds per turn, how fast people play. And you can see an awful lot of people, like 16 people played for less than 10 seconds per turn. These people weren't even reading the text. They were just pushing buttons. And there were a lot of them. And then another 19 averaged less than 25 seconds to make their turns. Let me comment on a striking pattern I've noticed. There have been a lot of players who, despite all the warnings at the beginning, we say, this is not a game. This is not for light play. You got to dive in here. It's going to be big. complicated, take you a long time. And yet there are lots of people who just sort of jump in, play a few moves, and then quit. Moreover, I found a website where somebody, I was confused, where are all these people coming from? I certainly haven't done that much publicizing of the design. And so, clearly this is some kind of word of mouth phenomenon, but even that, the number of players we're talking about, even that just seems wrong. So I did an internet search and I did find one blog where somebody mentioned Morte D'Arthur and gave the link to the game, and a bunch of people apparently went and played it. What was striking, though, was the response of the people. The most striking was the guy who posted this long thing on it. And at the beginning, he said, I only played 5 moves. And near the end, he said, it's junk. And we've had a number of those cases. One of the particularly, George Dawson here. Let's let George in. For example, very early on, I'm not going to name names, but I invited a person who is an eminent, actually of a, well, no, I invited an eminent designer to play and comment to me privately on Morte D'Arthur, and this person, I later found out from my usage records, I was able to conclude that she played 5 moves. For some reason, 5 is the magic number. And she came back to me and said she was very, she didn't like it at all. The protagonist was a misogynist, just a generally evil person. And I was thinking, wait, Arthur comes across as an evil person? And anyway, this critic had a lot of nasty things to say about it, which was very disappointing. I didn't try to defend it or answer her points. I just thank you very much for your criticisms, because obviously she didn't know what, I'm sorry, I gave away her gender. She didn't know what the hell she was talking about. And that is apparently I've seen this happen in at least 3 cases, and I suspect there are a number of others that I suspect are similar, where a person came in, played just a few moves, and then decided, oh, that's junk. Some of them said, oh, this is just interactive fiction. This is not different from anything else. It's same old, same old. And in almost every case, these people said that, had negative things to say about it and had only played a little tiny amount before they walked away. Nevertheless, there were some people, most people seem to come in and take 2 or 3 minutes to, think it over. There were a few, though, this is like 4 minutes, and there were a few of them, a few of them actually took a long time. I ended up throwing out their data. One guy, for example, would play a move and then 20 minutes later play another move, and then half an hour later play another move. And I really don't think they were spending all that time thinking about or reading. I suspect they were, I don't know, watching a TV show and making moves during commercials or something like that. Anyway, but it was this is, I think, interesting data. It does show that a goodly number of people, that a lot of people are just toying with it. They just dip their toes in. But a goodly number of people are giving it due consideration. So in fact, somewhere in here, I have here we go. 54 of the 98 players made less than 11 moves. So more than half. Let's see.
Is there a correlation between average time per turn and how many turns somebody actually did?
Oh, yeah. Although there were some players, the only real, in general, short times did correlate with few turns. But there were some people who were clearly just button clicking. You could see very short times and they did a lot of turns, just clickety, 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 click. And I have no idea why they were doing that, because it was obvious they couldn't possibly be reading everything. So
yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of that, like I have played it that way, and there's like a tension between reading and gameplay, and that tension I think is resolved in the fullness of the piece, but it's a lot of time commitment, and people are more allergic to it now because there's a sea of content everywhere on every platform, etc. But I think your numbers have improved since you got the median, right? And then we're learning a little bit about it. But I do think you have to address that there's a valid way to play the game where it's a replay and you're moving quickly because you're familiar.
yeah.
And there's what you could say is a semi-valid way to play the game where you're doing it for the first time and you're just trying to get through the first like 50, 60 encounters and get some sense of texture of what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
And then what happened with me is I would slow down and read on other periodic encounters that just pulled me in, right? So that's good that happens.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just run through some of these. This is a spreadsheet. Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, here's the one on the total number of players who reached various, certain things. Here's some of the variables I was looking at and how their average values changed. BG, you can see in a lot of, this is an interesting one. It stayed fairly steady until about the middle and then suddenly jumped up. So anyway, this is an early, what is this? Oh, yeah, this is highest turn achieved by different players, total moves, highest move achieved, and then this is just a Boolean value for where they sat in the septiles, and I don't have the graph of this. Let's see, spreadsheet data copy, yeah. Oh, this one, let's look here. How many players completed how many turns? So like here, this is on a gross scale. Most of the players completed less than 50 turns, but there was, it looks like about 15 players got all the way to the end. So basically, either you walked away after just a little bit of playing, or you followed through all the way to the end. And these people, I suspect, were, although they're only halfway through, I suspect that if my data had extended a few days further, these people in the middle here would have moved over here. So what else do we
It'd be a good one to get a histogram of the cohorts of how many sessions it took somebody. If you just heuristically say a session is like 4 hours or it's a calendar day or whatever, you could have a few variations.
Yeah. So, and some of these, here's a good example. This, whoops, come on, that's stupid. This character here only did 5 turns and managed to do it in 9 seconds. You really have to wonder what the hell is going on here. And there were a number of these, button pushers. So anyway, this is average seconds per turn. This is sorted by delay. Here was one person This is 6 minutes per turn. So, and they played only 15 turns.
I do have to
So-
say, I did do some debugging on here, so I'm wondering if some of the button pushing may have been someone like myself who was going through and just trying to get through as much as possible and figure out what was going, whether things were going weird or whatnot.
Yeah, that's a reasonable explanation for some of it. Just or they're starting over, but they already know. I don't care about the first 50 turns. I care only about blah blah blah. Let's see. Oh no, not that. This.
Another good one would be to look at average seconds per encounter by encounter cohort. So you see what encounters are really grabbing people.
Yes, that would be turn it around and look the other way. I did not do that. I had considered it, but well, here's one of the problems. When you look at individuals, these are individual values, you can readily see there's a lot of scatter in this data. And so it's very difficult to get meaningful results unless you're willing to average them together. So anyway, I think, let's make sure. Yeah. Let me just look at this one. Yeah, this is, oh no, this is the ideal data. I went through, boy, this was something that failed miserably. I went through the source and I toted up what would happen if the player made the ideal choice every single time based on what I knew of the internal variables. And this is what I got for one of the variables. And the problem with this is that it is far better than what real people do. That is, I was using this graph in order to decide how to give people feedback. And the problem is most people, their curve runs, way down here somewhere. And so I was always giving them feedback along the lines of, boy, you really suck. And that required a dramatic change.
That's also, if I may interrupt again, that's
Sure.
also a rather special variable because it's one where you're mostly getting debited it. And then there's lots of opportunities to earn some spirit. I think it's spirituality, right? So you earn spirituality, but it's part of the sort of Socratic method. And if you end up north of 0, you unlock the ability to do the good ending. You can still flub it, but so I think with something like you've done very simple like inclination formulas that are the foreground of how this turns out, and that's like one example. So anyway, just
there we go.
and maybe like for example the timid versus dominant one, that might be more randomized as well. I'm not sure, I've seen the data, but it would be interesting to see.
Okay, I'm finally catching up on the chat after stopping the share. Okay. Yeah, I figured some of the fast clicking was people, who'd already done it once and didn't need to read a second time. Anyway, I'm going to digress for a moment here. Where is that? Here we go. Is this it? Okay, yeah. My first attempt at feedback to the player, well, no, my second attempt was with C-Boot, and I didn't mention this. I should have described this much earlier. I had metrics for C-Boot for how well the people were playing. And the feedback was done through the encounter system. I first did encounters way back in C-Boot. In fact, I might as well just send you the text here. Can I just drag and drop? Yeah, it's only right. There you go. If you can look at that, have you gotten it yet? It's just story 17. Has anybody been able to see that yet?
I downloaded it. I'm taking a look to see if I can actually open it. I can open it. Yeah. Suddenly the door flies open.
Yeah. And yeah, just take a minute and read it, and then I'll explain some of the stuff in it.
So it's you as director, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And in many ways it's you know, I did a lot of great self-deprecating humor. Don't you you're acting like this is some sort of game or something, you clod. Don't you realize that this is art? I'll just point out some of the things about it. You'll notice occasionally the alphanumeric symbols right in the middle of the text. Those are markers for the names of the characters being referred to, possessive values, pronouns, and so forth. Then after that, though, come the 4 options. Each they're separated by the backslash, and those basically you get the option and the response to it. But there is one thing that's important here, and that is the very last one where the player says, "Go to hell, Crawford." That is followed by the four characters C4PA. That's calculator input for a little internal calculator I built that basically says, I believe it's saying load variable. C means load variable something or other. Stick a 4 onto the stack, subtract or divide, and store that back into the variable. Basically, it's just this variable subtract equals something. And oh no, it's just C4P. And that changes an internal variable. So it's a very simple way of calculating responses. And then the text is a cloud passes over the sun, the earth shudders. Basically, what this is doing is hurting the player's status. In other words, you insult the designer and you pay a price for it. There were earlier ones that made this a little more explicit, but I had a lot of fun with these encounters, and they did provide good feedback. Basically, my point here concerns the calculator system I used. That's a good, clean, simple way of managing specifics for calculations in a text-based system. And the coding for it is actually very simple. So, I mean, I was doing this on a Mac in 86 or 87. And so it was, I'm not sure if I think it was still being done in integer arithmetic too. So I don't know when it became fast enough to do floating point stuff. It must have been that. Yeah, it must have been there by 87. Anyway.
I think it's when they started including actual floating point chips with the CPUs that it started getting a little more fast.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that then is a quickie summary of 40 minutes of the various analytical techniques I did. I have some ideas for other stuff, but they are a lot more complicated, and I'm not sure that they are worth the effort. For now, I need to understand this data. The lessons I've drawn from it are, first, there are always going to be idiots who dip their toe in the water, even though I say, don't dip your toe in the water. And many of these idiots will later condemn the design. Okay, fine. There's nothing I can do about that. Oh, yes, that's right. The big analysis I intend to do is to look closely at each turn and look at the distribution of responses to it. If, for example, on a given turn, there are 3 options, does everybody pick option number 1 and very few people pick the other ones? For example, there's one encounter where Arthur runs into a boy in the forest near the boundary, and he has 3 options. One is the boy speaks Saxon, and so they can't communicate. One is to wave and point back at Saxon territory and yell, "Go home, kid." And another is to say, "All right, you're coming back with me, you're going to be a slave," which is not necessarily a bad thing. And then the third is to kill the kid. And I knew very few people would choose that option, which means it's a bad design to put in options that people aren't going to use. And so I know I have to go back and fix that at some point. So
I'm not sure that's a bad design, though, honestly, because it gives you 3 levels of, whether you like go back the way you came, come with me and go into servitude, or it's a Saxon, so there you go. I mean, it's a moral choice along all those rounds.
I actually don't. Wait, somewhere here I do have that selection data. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say killing the kid. You just put as option number 1, and actually people statistically chose it out of laziness of that shot. But actually, no, it's. I agree with Craig. I think it's a good encounter as it is.
I saw stats on Mass Effect 3, and it was like 92% of the users went the good aligned route. So that, I mean, even the blockbusters will have that crazy distribution on some of these.
Yeah, here, I just looked it up. That particular encounter has 3 options, and of 20 times people made choices. 3 times they chose to kill him, 6 times they chose to send him home, and 11 times they took him as a slave. So in the ideal, a perfect design, it'll always be equal. All 3 choices, people will. That means you're really hanging on the edge. These are really tough decisions. But that also means that a lot of people are gonna fail, because in the Socratic dialogues, there really is such a thing as a right decision and a wrong decision. So
I don't think every encounter has to be StarCraft. It doesn't have to be 3 things that are. I mean, that's hard to achieve, right? So if your core inclination formulas in the macro are kind of like StarCraft, and you have a 3-way split on how to handle the core scenario, I think that's a good job. And I don't think that has to be. I think that also that, like, if you look at the way people go into the military, and they really struggle to get people to shoot at somebody, and they have to like really break them down and dehumanize them to do it, because it's not a natural thing. And yeah, there is a small portion of the population that will do that, right? That don't feel this compunction. So this seems to be something with human behavior, and the horrors of game design of the 20th century have been the ability to inculcate this compulsivity to do something that is kind of evil in a mechanical and efficient way. and induce people into that game. And then, so this is what used to call phantasm when I was playing like DEF CON. I was a really good DEF CON player. And of course, you're nuking the whole world. The more mega deaths you induce, the more puntos you get, right? So that's just to put a little stank on a military victory. Theoretically, you can play it in more disarmament kind of way. But so I think this is something that is a core thing. And George's comment about Mass Effect was really interesting, and it made me think about all this. Stanford prison experiments, another example, right? So if you were actually able to make a story world where there's this game mirage, and you go towards that, and then you're actually doing evil, but it seems normalized due to like pre-existing genre conventions, and then the actual gameplay in the replay is learning how to somehow go against that violence, right? Which is actually it's a lot harder. I think that's interesting. And I think that's rings through here, and it's something that's inspiring me for my work. So just some thoughts.
Well, I'll basically, Morte D'Arthur is almost entirely first draft. That is, there was so much material that I had to create. Basically, I wrote it once and I haven't looked at it since. And you really need to rewrite something at least 3 times before it gets any good. And so I'm just now beginning the second draft. And even that draft is a rather hurried draft. There are 360 encounters here. And the toughest part is dealing with the dialogues. Those are really hard to get right because you coming up with good options when Merlin asks Arthur a question, you need to give Arthur reasonable replies, or at least plausible ones. And sometimes that's impossible. So I've been working on the, which one is this? Oh, Implications of Londinium dialogue, where messenger from Londinium comes and there's a message, and then he goes away, and Merlin confronts Arthur and says, okay, what did you learn from that? And Arthur is supposed to go through a logical sequence to draw the conclusion that he can't win. But the logic is not obvious. And so after going over it I've been working on this for 4 days now. After going over it several times, I finally just threw the whole thing away and started from scratch. And I now have, here we go, here's the first, oh, right. Is the shark eating this?
It is, unfortunately, yes.
Okay, here. Oh, this is stupid. If I move it around, will it learn? Oh, well. Anyway, gosh, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 23 encounters in this thing. And every one of them has to be carefully tuned. And sadly, of these, most have only 2 options. Only one of them has 3 options. And I'd say it looks like maybe a quarter of them have only 1 option. So this is all very frustrating, but you know, what do you say when here we go. Let me find a good one option. Here we go. Merlin, Arthur has said that no, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. I have to give you the whole context in order to understand the significance of the different options. So anyway, the floor is open. Any comments, thoughts, ideas?
Well, first off, if you can scan that file, we can take a look at it to contemplate this kind of design matrix that you're grappling with. And another point is that I think we should maybe introduce this idea of a scene as an abstraction, as a bundle of encounters which are meant to be, co-temporaneous and closely sequentialized and grouped, right? Independent of a spool, which might be just like one flag that's, was a track, fork in the tracks a long time ago or something. I've got a lot of images that I made this month. I could wax on about producing these images at scale, but basically, I think I'll just link to my Midjourney account. People can just follow me and take a look at what I've been doing. And I've been going a little crazier in January since I'm doing sci-fi, and I learned a lot from working on the Morte D'Arthur images because it's a very high constraint type deal. And now I'm like less constrained. I don't really care if the protagonists look different in every image. That's a part of the vibe, right? So I'm just leaning into that. I'm mixing different models together. So V3 that's older is more impressionism. There's an anime model. I'm splicing in things from animes. So I kind of want to try to make animation out of this a little bit and just try to turn up the dial on spectacle as much as is feasible with like hundreds of dollars in budget, and so that's fun. And then I've got some pretty cool ideas. So I haven't started in Sweepweave yet, but Sasha pushed his update, so I could get started on that next. And I've got enough images now that I can use them for breeding stock or make them a single GIF for an encounter, but I'm not going to do that for every encounter because that's crazy. It's a lot of work. Oh, great.
Now it's, God damn it, now it's blurred. I can't win. I'm going to get this right. Background and effects. There. There is the tree for the Londinium encounter. You can see it's a mess. So I have a question I would like to put to everybody. First, has everybody seen the new Merlin image?
I have, yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask how long did it take you to realize that I'm the model for Merlin?
Right from the start for me.
Okay. I went to
took me a
great
little bit.
lengths to try to
Well, not the first run, but by the end it was obvious in the video.
yeah. Oh yeah, in the video, because yeah, I can't hide that. But in the color images, the modifications, here we go. The sequence of steps for modifications was 42 steps long. Here's that sequence of steps. I've cut out a bunch of ones that don't produce a visual result, but in order to go from the photograph in the upper left to the final image, took a lot of work. It would take about an hour for each of those images. There's a lot of detail work, but
I had a bit of a head start on this though, because I played Excalibur and
you know the trick, yeah. By the way, the blue hat is something I first made 50 years ago when I started riding motorcycles. I needed a helmet liner and they didn't exist at the time. So I made my own, but they didn't exist because they had to be precisely fitted to your head. So I made my own, and that's what it is. That's why it's kind of ratty. Putting the helmet on and off sort of wears it down. So anyway, and yes, the mustache and eyebrows are just photoshopped on. I did go to Amazon in one of there was a lot of work setting this up. I went to Amazon and bought a little toy mustache and eyebrow kit. And these are stick-ons. And there were like 50 different styles, and I experimented with them, and it didn't look right. And then so I gave them to a friend of mine who teaches kindergarten, and she said the kids loved them. So, are there any other comments or questions?
What was I muted earlier when you opened the floor? Because I gave a little spiel, but I think I might have been muted. None of you remember me talking. Okay. So my quick update, I just posted my Midjourney account link. I don't know if you have to be a member to see it. But if you wanted to try making, you wanted to try a $10 thing, or I think they have a quick trial, you could probably take a look at it. And if you were gonna foray into this, you can learn from what I'm doing there. So I've produced a lot of images, I've fleshed out my thing, I'm getting ready to actually start writing and sweep weave. I'm leaning towards making some animation for some key encounters, but not all of them. It's too much work. And maybe editing some of it together into a GIF format. So it's like just the same as what you're doing, but instead of PNG, it's GIF, right? So you can go there with that. And I've got a pretty good idea of what the inclination formula puzzles, if you will, or riddle. I think it's more of a riddle than a puzzle, right? But part of the reason why your time series on spirituality is so bimodal when you idealize is because it is a riddle. And once you've kind of got the idea of the riddle, it's easy to go bimodal on it. It's not really it's not like anything close to a bell curve distribution of skill point, the scoring or anything, right? Like wisdom isn't a skill. And this is where it differentiates from games, isn't it? So yeah. So in this game, there's going to be a lot of sci-fi explosions and combat, and the more bestial you are, the more you try to get like experience points to unlock encounters where you get to do bigger amounts of violence. You can like unlock crazy tactical nuke mortar and black hole gun and so on. The more you just kind of become evil, because you're going to end up genociding this whole solar system, right? So then on the replay, you get to try and like deconstruct that a little bit, or maybe you figure it out the first time. But
Craig,
I think people not figuring out the first time is okay.
Craig, what does your link point to?
That points to a project that I've been working on. I've been calling it Hearsay, which is Hearsay, not heresy, which is my reworking of the Morte D'Arthur engine in Python. And so I'm pushing that out there. If folks want to take a peek at it and take a look at what's been going on, I've been writing encounters, and I can sympathize with how long it takes to write an actual encounter. It's taking me about 30 minutes a day to write one encounter. And yeah, there's a lot that goes into this stuff. And I'm doing a lot of first draft stuff as well. Like you mentioned, where I don't necessarily know where the story is going. I just know what I want to do in order to get there. And so if anyone wants to take a peek at it, if you have any comments, questions, I'd be more than happy.
By the way, that's one of the nice things about the general encounter technology is that you can take it in a bunch of different directions. And I do not believe that my own design is somehow canonical. There are a lot of different ways to do this, sweep weave. And I am curious to see how this blossoms out, what other variations we see. Somebody might come up with a really neat, some new ideas that would make it better. My caution to everybody is don't succumb to galloping featureitis. Keep it simple. That's almost the universal problem when programmers try to build any kind of development environment. It is always too complicated and too powerful. So cut down on the power. Any other observations?
I had one thought. I had saw either on your blog or in that Discord that the graphs you were showing today, and I was thinking about like I don't know, like leading with a video and having if you're Merlin, you as a French chorus interluding, you're very charismatic on video. I mean, maybe that's a way to capture people where you as Merlin are breaking fourth wall, explaining what this thing is, and then maybe every 20 encounters, giving the user, a little bit of that I don't know, a little bit of that hit, like, oh, you're doing great, or like, what are you doing, Arthur? Come on now. I don't know. It went through my head that very charismatic on video, Chris. I mean, use the talents you got.
One problem with that, a lot of people objected that Merlin takes a long time to load. Was how many people had the experience? I ended up throwing away the big video. You can't see that anymore. Now you just see it's not postage stamp, but it's still a much smaller video that I designed for, that I set up for smartphones. Has anybody, can you guys give me some feedback on how long it took to download?
I thought the buffering added to the effect because it's like you're glitching out of existence, in this kind of existential quick annihilation hell, which is probably more theologically sound anyway. But and yeah, I liked it actually. So I don't worry about it.
Any other opinions on whether it's just too long, especially the big one? If you've seen it.
Yes.
My initial thing was more that it was just a surprise. It's like you're going through this and image system, and so it's just going along with this, and then all of a sudden there was this 1 gigabyte file that decided that it all of a sudden wanted to show up, and that was more the surprise element than anything. It wasn't so much that I was I pay good money for shoddy bandwidth. But at the very least, if there's a little bit of, okay, there's going to be some video in here, so be prepared for that. That's my main thing, is just saying, okay, prepare the folks for the stuff that's coming along. This may not be something you want to try and do in a grocery checkout lane or something like that on the shoddy Wi-Fi over at Meijer or whatnot.
Any other feedback?
Yes. For me, it did take very long, and in the beginning, I was afraid that maybe other people wouldn't understand what was coming, because there is this little message that says, "Wait, he's coming," or something like this.
Yeah.
And then there's this creepy, grainy, black and white video. I was like, what is coming? And it took me. I waited because, of course, I had invested a lot of time already in this, but I was afraid that someone would think, this is a static picture. I don't understand what is going on, or something like this. But it did take a long time.
I think
it took
a big
it
GIF
took me a
might
long
help
time
that.
to
Go ahead, Algernon.
it took me a long time to realize that it was a video the first time too. Then I had to download it. I couldn't even play it on the browser.
Wow. Okay. Anybody, Patrick,
Well, but my internet is very slow, so.
Well, you're a user. One of the big problems a lot of designers or developers make is to assume that the user has the same optimal hardware that the developer has. I once saw a design. I was asked to evaluate a design for a charity, and they spent a lot of money on this design, and it was atrocious because the developers had this magnificent hardware, and it ran beautifully on the hardware, but for anybody else, it was stutter, wait, click. It was terrible. Chris Conley, how fast was it for you?
I guess I don't remember. I think it ran fine, but it's been a couple of months since I played through the whole thing.
Okay then. Well, we're out of time here. Any last comments? Anybody?
I feel like the theme of the day is pacing, and we've discussed feedback, and now we're getting feedback from the feedbacker users, right? From all the data. And we're getting a nice distribution at a visual glance of how people are playing it. And I think pacing is everything in games, you know, at some level. Every game is a narrative game and every game is a rhythm game, but the rhythm can be highly distended, and the narrative can be just a grid of physics, or you know, it could be something like Dragon's Lair, right, which was like the first QuickTime game, and that was the first kind of the wrong approach, but the first attempt to really be like, no, this is like a storytelling game, and but it's like you dodge or you die is the story. It's not an interesting story mechanically as far as human condition goes. And should every encounter be like a long ponderous thing, or should there be like kind of some pacing in that? Can you pace it by scoring people in some feedback way based on their alacrity or over alacrity? That's kind of interesting. That's something that came to mind. You know, I'm going to try it vanilla before I try to do anything like that, but I do think that, and like maybe a musical scoring where the score steps up as you jump from encounter to encounter, so people feel a pull in pacing that way. That's kind of interesting. It's a bigger question. I'll leave to others, but I think that's a good theme.
Okay, George, thanks for that reference there. I will definitely look that up.
Yeah, on that, you know, it's AI spoken word. The stock ones are really good, but you can input your own voice. So if you want James Earl Jones as a character, I mean, we're talking minutes, and in just a few commas, or like, okay, I want a longer pause here, put in more periods. And I mean, you can get this pacing, and it sounds incredibly natural for these. I mean, I've been playing with like 5-second voice snippets, and it's basically nailing the reenactment on these voice snippets. And I've been playing with like Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, getting Space Ghost to say what I want, and these other little, you know, toy things playing with the tech. But I was thinking using those defaults are much more natural. I mean, just putting in whatever, and it sounds like somebody's speaking it. I mean, it's quite convincing.
I'll
They
definitely.
also do animations. You can have a character kind of bobbing their head a little bit, and it's a little too uncanny valley for me, so I didn't want to recommend it, but since we're bringing it up, that also exists.
Okay, then. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll meet again in a month. If you have any suggestions or ideas for the topic, by all means, email me. And otherwise, I'll see you in a month.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.